This is the OFN Today on the Our Lads Football Network, and we're ready to talk New Orleans Saints football with Ross Jackson. He's the host of the Locked On Saints podcast and editor of Canal Street Chronicles at SBNation.com. Ross, good to have you on again.
Hey, very glad to be back. Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be able to come back and chat with you some more, man. We had a good time last time.
Yes, and we're going to have a good time again, and I'm sure repeatedly throughout the season, as long as Drew Brees stays healthy, because this is going to be another playoff team. So there's a lot of excitement, I'm sure, for the Saints, and maybe they're, if they can get that one more Super Bowl win with Drew Brees, and that's going to be the trick, isn't it? Is to figure out how to get over the hump.
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest thing in terms of making sure that, look, this is kind of the last run. Michael Thomas was talking with media the other day, and he was asked the age-old question, is it Super Bowl or bust for the Saints this season? And his response, unsurprisingly, was, it's been Super Bowl or bust since I've been here. So that's very much the attitude going into this 2020 season for sure.
All right. Now, one of the things is interesting. I was looking back at the last few seasons and trying to figure out specifically what it is that's been holding back the Saints. Now, I can just think about what I remember, but good hard data is always key to any argument. And there's just no denying that when you look at the stats, what the Saints miss more than anything offensively is they miss the 2016 Saints. They miss Brandon Cooks. They miss also having Willie Snead. They miss being a very dangerous offense that can bite you at any time. Now, the regular season, they're still dangerous. You've got your Thomas and Kamara. But when you get to the postseason, here's some interesting stats. The last 2 years, Drew Brees, 2018, he averaged 266 yards a game in the regular season. And 2019, he averaged 270 yards a game during the season. In the last two playoff losses, he's averaged 228 yards per game, about 40 yards less. And he's only thrown 3 touchdown passes and 2 interceptions in those 2 playoff games. But what I've noticed more than anything have been Alvin Kamara stats. Alvin Kamara in 5 career playoff games has rushed for 173 yards on a 3.3 carry average and 2 rushing touchdowns, no receiving touchdowns. You can't win New Orleans Saint playoff games with stats like that for Kamara. You just can't.
No, you absolutely cannot. And certainly last year was a down year for him, particularly in the receiving category. His averages dropped a ton in receiving. During the regular season, his averages on the ground were pretty much the same as 4.7 this year, 4.6 per carry last year. But then, as you mentioned, you get into the playoffs, and the Saints have been quick to abandon the run. And that's one of the big things that makes Alvin Kamara so good is the fact that he can be effective late into the game. But if you abandon the run because either it's not working early or because you want to shift over to, more of a pass heavy offense or whatever that might be, which certainly happened to the Saints this past season when they were taking on the Minnesota Vikings in the wild card round as a 13-3 team, which is already sort of outlandish enough. But that was a team that quickly went to the pass. And certainly they miss elements of the 2016 season. I think that you can look back even more recent than that, the 2018 team that went on to score over 40 points several times throughout that season, the 2017 team that went on to go 8 straight, including a game to where they ran 24 straight times and came away with 3 touchdowns. So there's different elements, over these last couple of years, whether it be in the passing game or in the run game, that have benefited the Saints that they just need to sort of figure out a way to replicate once they get into the playoffs, as opposed to the issues and struggling that they've had, particularly on the offensive side with situational play calling, and similarly over on the defensive side as well, which never puts the offense in a good enough position to where they can continue to run the ball, can continue to lean on a guy like Alvin Kamara, and can continue to chew away the clock and sort of dominate the game the way that you like to see them do. This is a team that wants to win time of possession, and in the postseason, they struggle a lot to do that.
Yeah, because look, there's no doubt that the big addition is Sanders on offense, and he is going to have to play a huge role. They can't afford any injuries. He's 33. They have to have him on the field for playoff time. Because last year, I didn't even realize this until I looked at my notes. But last year, the Saints had only 3 wide receivers catch 7 or more passes. I mean, Michael Thomas is like, we know what kind of a player he is. All right. He's a beast.
Right.
We get it. But you've got to be able to spread it around when you get to the postseason. And and now that's why Sanders is there. Now Cook had a nice statistical year last year. Didn't do much in the postseason, but at least it gave Drew that tight end weapon that he had not had in previous seasons. Still, it's going to take a little bit more than Michael Thomas, or even maybe a little bit of a boost of Alvin Kamara to win a Super Bowl, and hopefully Emmanuel Sanders is the key.
Yeah, and it's outside of the skill position as well. You have to look at the offensive line. The interior offensive line was very faulty for the Saints in the playoffs in 2019 against against Minnesota. That was not great in terms of their performance. And certainly that doesn't help a quarterback like Drew Brees, who does like to get rid of the ball, within 2.5 seconds or so. But if he's got pressure, especially coming directly up the middle during that time, it's going to limit what your offense is able to do. And so certainly that type of production was hindered by the lack of production that came from the offensive line. That's why the Saints moved on from Larry Warford. That's why they drafted Cesar Ruiz. And that's why they're hoping to be able to put out this younger, more improved, and much faster offensive line that can work in front of Alvin Kamara, that can work to keep Drew Brees clean for what we imagine is going to be his final season here in the NFL. And yeah, I mean, look, you add a guy like Emmanuel Sanders, it's a clear upgrade over a guy like Ted Ginn Jr., who had 119 fewer receptions than Michael Thomas and was the number 2 wide receiver on the team with only 427 yards. So he was also behind by nearly 1,300 yards during the season as well. I mean, the gap between Michael Thomas and the rest of this wide receiver core, not just the receiving core, but just the wide receivers that all told was humongous last year and pretty much at an unwinnable pace. It's very tough to maintain that. It's very, very tough to maintain that when you only have one option at that position. Adding Emmanuel Sanders, just like they took the time to address the interior offensive line, they took the time to address that wide receiver position. And I think Emmanuel Sanders is going to be a huge boost to the team. They're hoping for another boost out of a guy like Traquan Smith, who's going into his 3rd year, which is typically when you see a nice leap for a young player.
What happened to him last year?
But then you also... sophomore slump for the most part. I mean, but not even really a sophomore slump. I mean, it was the same thing that we saw his rookie season and that second season last year. He's just an inconsistent guy. He shows up and he'll have a couple of games like the Philadelphia game and the Washington game from 2 years ago, to where he goes over 100 yards on 3 catches. And then he has the rest of his season like you saw in 2019, which certainly he was hampered by the injury that he suffered in week 2, but just never really got back to the same place that he was, even though he produced pretty well in the first week of last season. So it's just been an inconsistency factor when it comes to Traquan Smith that they're hoping they'll eventually be able to work out of him going into this season.
Okay, besides Sanders, then some of the other new faces on offense, Ty Montgomery comes over from the Jets, played with the Packers and the Ravens, but don't expect him. I mean, it may be a little cutesy toy for Peyton to play with every once in a while, but
I would expect more from that. I would expect more than that from him. If he makes the roster, which of course it's hard for anybody that wasn't with the team that they're with right now the previous season to make any roster, considering the way that this offseason is. This offseason is always going to gear itself right now towards players that teams are most familiar with. That's why you see most of these 80 roster cutdowns being undrafted free agents, which actually isn't the case for New Orleans. Only 2 out of 10 were undrafted free agents for them. But a guy like Ty Montgomery is somebody that you won't see used the way that he was used in New York or Baltimore or even in Green Bay. You would see a bit more of an expansive use of him, something that's a little bit more akin to his first 2 seasons as a slot receiver in Green Bay, mixed with the time that he spent as a running back in Green Bay, as opposed to just one or the other. I mean, you look at what the Saints offense has done with a quarterback like Taysom Hill. You can't, you really have to look at what it's hard to imagine that they wouldn't find a way to get a guy like Ty Montgomery involved as more than just a gadget guy.
Yeah, because I mean, I agree. I mean, that's the thing. That's what I expected, how he was going to be used with the Jets last year. That's the reason why I thought he was there. Didn't happen because, and I've said this all along, Ty Montgomery is, as you said, he's a receiver first. Then you can throw him in the backfield and try to come up with creative ways to get the defense thinking and use him back there almost like that's his second or third option. But yeah, Tom Montgomery is more of maybe a returner / receiver first. Everything else is just an added plus. That's it.
Yeah, I think that he's valuable in that way. I mean, you bring him in. I mean, he's shown a penchant to run between the tackles. He's shown a penchant to run on the outside as well. So you take advantage of that when you can. But otherwise, you really lean on his receiving ability and use him any way that you can. That's going to allow him to contribute to this offense the way that he wants to. And the way that he wants to contribute is by being able to go out there and do several different things throughout a game, as opposed to being pigeonholed by a game plan from game to game. He's one of those guys to where if you come out there and you have Alvin Kamara, and let's say you have Alvin Kamara and Ty Montgomery in the huddle along with one tight end and two other wide receivers, are they in 21 personnel or are they in 11 personnel? It's that kind of a challenge for the opposing defense where they have to try to diagnose how Ty Montgomery might be used. And so if you can if you can vary up the way that you use him throughout a game in particular, that's where you begin to see a little bit of his added value beyond just him being used in a solid role, which is what you saw in his previous couple of stops.
Without rookie camp, Jawan Johnson, Marquez Callaway, those kids, or even Tommy Stevens, who you got to wonder what his shot is. Bringing in Winston, of course, and Hill being backup. But Johnson is the most intriguing. It'll be interesting to see exactly whether or not this is just going to be a year that he's just going to have to learn, not going to expect much from him because of the whole situation. But that's the player that I would probably look forward to keep an eye on maybe next year.
That's great. Yeah, I think that Jawan Johnson's somebody that has potential. He struggled a lot to stay healthy, both in his time at Penn State as well as at Oregon. The 33% contested catch percentage bothers you a little bit because, look, he's a 6'4" guy. He's a big guy, but if he can't do big guy things, then where does he contribute beyond that, right? He certainly contributes as a blocker. He's somebody that I'm looking for. The Saints had two tight ends end up opting out, Colwick, Jason Vanderlaan. I'm curious to see if they end up transitioning him or at least utilizing him at the tight end position during camp, because once those two tight ends ended up withdrawing, the Saints went and picked up two other guys, picked up a linebacker and a wide receiver, but they didn't touch that tight end position. So I'm curious to see if them picking up another wide receiver is at all a signifier of the fact that Jawan Johnson may shift over and play a little bit of tight end here during camp. The Saints have said over and over again that they're really looking forward to emphasizing two tight end sets, 12 personnel throughout this 2020 season. And so you want to have, enough tight ends to where you can do first team, second team, third team with a pair of tight ends in every set. And thankfully you have two quarterbacks in both Tommy Stevens and Taysom Hill that can play tight end too. But for the most part, I'm curious to see how Jawan Johnson ends up factoring into that. Marquez Callaway is somebody that I'm very excited about. He's a more pure wide receiver. He has some special teams ability as well. So he's somebody I'm excited about seeing in camp this season to see if he ends up making a practice squad so that he becomes another guy much like Jawan Johnson to watch for next year.
And Troutman, the third round draft pick, the tight end. You don't pick a tight end in the third round unless you have plans for him. You've already hinted how the Saints plan to use their tight ends this year. So that's a player that definitely can contribute this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, tight end's usually one of those positions where you don't expect much from them their rookie season. They're usually, trying to really get an understanding of the game. It's a big transition for tight ends to come from college to the NFL. The blocking schemes are different. Play schemes are different. There's a lot of different usages for tight ends once they make that transition. But look, the guy caught 14 touchdowns last season. I'll be damned if the Saints aren't going to find some way to take advantage of that pass catching ability, even if it's just in a, 12 personnel red zone role to where he ends up being that kind of go up and get it type of a body like what the Saints used to have in Jimmy Graham before he begins to, sort of acclimate to this team a little bit more to where he gets to be used in, more situations. You see him on the field more. I think he's somebody whose snap count and usage is going to increase as the season goes
He
along.
could end up actually being the number one tight end in 2021.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's why you pick a tight end in the third round. That's your hope. So taking a look then at the quarterback situation, you're pretty confident that this is Breeze's last season, no matter what?
I feel pretty confident about it. Look, this offseason, he really, really apparently weighed his options in terms of weighing retirement, and that's something we haven't seen from him before. It was almost always a question of when, never if, when it came to Drew Brees. This, I think, was the first time that we've really embarked on the conversation of if he was going to come back and be a part of New Orleans. We knew that if he was coming back to the NFL, that he wasn't going anywhere else, that he was always going to be either a Saint or nobody, or, either a Saint or not in the league. But there was some legitimate question marks around whether or not he was going to be in the league. And so for me, that's you come back for a year. It's hard for me to see a situation in which he either wins the goal for the season and then decides to come back again, as opposed to sort of like, elwaying and riding off into the sunlight, or a situation which he comes back and there's another disappointing playoff exit that makes him want to come back and try again. It's just tough to find what the motivation would be to come back for a 21st season, unless he just wants to continue to battle with Tom Brady for those touchdown records. But for the most part, this feels like the last sort of ride for Drew Brees.
Are you surprised then, if that's the case? Why did to me that means that Peyton really believes Taysom Hill could be the starter in 2021. Otherwise, I'm not sure why you wouldn't try to figure out a way to keep Bridgewater.
Yeah, I mean, they ended up letting Bridgewater, go and take a much larger contract, $10 million a year contract, which is beyond what the team was willing to give to another quarterback at this time. You look at the fact that, they already held him last year on over $7 million. He was the highest paid backup last season. And so I'm sure that they worked to keep him. But, look, they do believe strongly in Taysom Hill. I don't know that I do, but they do believe strongly in Taysom Hill at the quarterback position. But even if it's not Taysom Hill, they also brought in Jameis Winston, who the Saints now have a big advantage in maintaining next year if he decides to, if he pans out. If they see what they like from him in practice in terms of his growth as a decision maker, ball placement, his grace under pressure, his grace under fire, if they end up seeing improvements in that in practice, they're the only ones that are going to see it. The rest of the NFL won't see it without a preseason. Mm-hmm. So unless Drew Brees ends up getting hurt and Jameis Winston, for whatever reason, comes in to play quarterback, the NFL has no idea what the sort of quantity is when it comes to Jameis Winston. And that puts the Saints at a big advantage if they decide, hey, Jameis has made the strides and the improvements that we wanted to see from him. He can be our guy in 2021. They can end up locking him down and still paying Taysom Hill the contract that they've given him as not only the backup quarterback, but also the offensive weapon.
All right, defensively, how important was it to add Nigel Bradham, who just came in over the last couple of days, a position of need for the Saints?
Big time. Injuries all over the place at that position. Outside of Demario Davis, they don't really have a consistently healthy linebacker outside of maybe Craig Robertson, who, is a special teams guy at this point in his career, and he's great depth and intelligent depth and a great mentor to have, but he's not somebody you want necessarily in your start. I mean, look back to last year at the San Francisco game and the way that game went. That's a prime example of what happens when you lose your, two of your three starting linebackers. The Saints going out and grabbing somebody like Nigel Bradham, who has a little bit of an injury history, isn't the same player that he was 2 or 3 years ago, but still is a great option for the Saints and certainly better than the depth that they had available to them previously. I'm very excited about a young guy. He was a 7th-round draft pick last season, Caden Ellis. He came in from Idaho. He was somebody that started off as a special teams player last year, was injured. His season ended up coming to an early end, but he's somebody that the coaching staff is very excited about. But outside of him, you've got question marks. You've got, Kiko Alonso, who right now is on the physically unable to perform list because he's still working his way off of an ACL tear in the playoffs. So that's going to take some time. Alex Anzalone, who has had just a litany of injuries in his career, not just in the NFL, but also in Florida at college. He dealt with a lot of, shoulder injuries and season-ending injuries. They all have sort of this injury history that's there. Chase Hansen, who was an undrafted free agent from last year, is still on the roster right now. He came in on the non-football injury list and never, made the active roster and was never able to even show up at training camp. So the Saints ended up stashing him away. So still a lot of question marks in terms of health. And so you get a guy like Nigel Bradham, who, look, he's 6 foot, I think he's 6'2", 240, somewhere around there, 6'4", 6'2", 240. He's, your usual linebacker build, maybe a little bit smaller, but in terms of what he's able to do in coverage, he's an improvement over a guy like Kiko Alonso. And he's somebody that if you lose Alex Anzalone, you don't take the big hit that you lose in coverage. When you lose a guy like that, you have a guy like Nigel Bradham that can back him up. The best case scenario for the Saints is that they have a new starting linebacker here that ends up being able to step up if Kiko Alonso isn't going to be ready to be full go at the top of the season. He can play at Sam, he can play at Mike, he can play at Will, whatever it is they feel most comfortable with him. Worst case scenario, they have really experienced depth that can be effective against the run game. He's a decent run stopping linebacker. He's a great tackler, but he's fantastic in coverage. Of course, he was better, but still is very good in coverage. And then that allows you to not rush any of those younger guys like Caden Ellis and then 3rd-round draft pick from this year, Zach Bond, into a role that they're not ready to take on, particularly with this truncated offseason.
Right now, the Saints, Bond was definitely brought in to add pass rushing to this defensive unit because
it's an element of what he's there for.
Yes. Jordan is a monster, and I remember I was asked by Neil Hornsby, the former founder of Pro Football Focus, it was about 5 years ago. It was 2 years before Jordan's breakout year. He
Hmm.
asked me who if I had to pick a defensive MVP, who would it be? And I picked Jordan that year, and
Hmm.
I knew I was probably the only one doing it. It didn't work out that year, but then the next year he blew up and
Yeah.
became that player. Um, but they need help. It's a
Hmm.
much better defensive unit. We get it from Saints teams past, but you got to find that secondary pass rush option. Not sure if Bond is capable of doing that as a rookie. Davenport is a pretty good run defender, and he's a pretty good player overall. But you get the feeling that, or at least the assumption was, the
Hmm.
investment in Davenport was for him to be that guy. And
Yeah.
what is what's the hope for Davenport as far as this year and his career, what he could bring to Saints defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Marcus Davenport, certainly the investment in him was to come in and be a secondary pass rusher. And when he's been on the field, he's proven that he can be that. I mean, he had 6 sacks last season. If he would have been able to stay healthy, he unfortunately was injured just during that Week 14 game where the injuries were just continuing to pile on for the Saints defense, whether it be at the second level or whether it be at the defensive line, and then continue to pile on weeks 15, 16, 17, trickled into the secondary at that point, particularly with the two safeties getting hurt. And so when you look at Marcus Davenport, the big question mark for him is just, can he stay healthy this season? He had the turf toe injury, he had the toe injury in his rookie seasons where he missed 5 games in the middle of the year, and then he had the Liz Frank injury last year that brought his season to an early end again at week 14. And after that, the Saints pass rush really started to fall off. And so when you lost Davenport and Rankins, actually, you lost both of those
That's
guys
right.
in the same game, which was not great for the Saints pass rush. They ended up having to blitz more from the second level. They didn't have their starters in the second level in order to really trust being able to do that. And then it put the secondary at jeopardy. You saw that pan out early on in games against Tennessee, for instance, and then all throughout the game against San Francisco. And then you saw issues with it during the wild card game against the Vikings, where there was really just no pass rush there, and they were not slacking, but they were behind in run defense because they don't really have a third edge defender. And I say edge defender as opposed to edge rusher because you have Cam Jordan, you have Marcus Davenport, who both can produce as a pass rusher, yes, but as you mentioned, are both very good against the run. You lose that run stopping ability and ability to seal off the edge when you have to go to a guy like Trey Hendrickson, who can produce as a pass rusher, but isn't really that great against the run. And that ended up creating some issues for them. Dalvin Cook almost became the first running back to go up against the Saints defense and rush for over 100 yards since 2017. Thankfully, the Saints stopped him 6 yards short, but it didn't matter when it came
No,
to the final score. You know what I mean?
sure.
And so I think the expectation with Marcus Avenport is just that he continues to grow the way that he has grown and the way that we've seen from his rookie year to his second year, and ideally another leap from his second year to his third year. It's just that he has to stay healthy and on the field and available in order to be able to show that.
If he's healthy and plays a full season, then you definitely believe he's a double-digit sack guy.
I think he's very close. I mean, I look at him as like 8 or 9. Hopefully, he can get into that double digit, but he's right around there. I think he hovers around there. I think you would have seen him get to about 8 or 9 in 2019, based upon what we saw from him and the production that he had as a pass rusher up until his injury, and particularly against the offensive lines he was about to go up against as well. That definitely would have made a big difference for him and would have helped him out. But yeah, I think that he's somebody that you do, and I think that the organization believes in very much, can be that second pass rusher.
Okay, now Eli Apple's gone, and I take it probably Saint fans are okay with that.
Everybody's very happy about that.
Yeah, Lattimore did not perform as well as he has in the past, and you bring in Malcolm Jenkins, which is a huge signing
Mhm.
for the safety spot on this team. What do you think about the makeup of the secondary? Because there is a lot of talent overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a secondary that Pro Football Focus just named the sixth most talented secondary in the NFL, and I would tend to put them there, just outside of the top five as well, maybe in conversation in the top five. But in terms of the personnel and what they have on paper, they look great. You've got Marshawn Lattimore, who improved on his 2018 season, but you're right, did not produce to the level that his 2017 Defensive Rookie of the Year
Why do you
campaign
think
looked
that
like.
is?
Although in 2018, it was a lot to do with injury. I mean, he
Okay.
missed a couple of games. He had the big injury against the Washington game. In 2019, things kind of improved for him a little bit more. He was able to stay healthy, stay available, and when he was healthy and available, we've shown that this team, score this team holds teams to a touchdown less when he plays more than 90% of the snaps.
Okay.
In this game. So it really comes down to him just being available and being able to be on the field. And so he has to, take care of himself and stay healthy, and hopefully, and he can only do that to an extent. There are other things that are completely out of his control, but his production was better last season than 2018, but 2018 was also a noticeable slump from his rookie campaign for sure. So he still has some sort of, some growth to show here, his trajectory and everything. You still want to see that kind of come upwards and trend upwards going into 2020. I think that having Janoris Jenkins opposite him now on the opposite side of the field as opposed to Eli Apple helps him a ton, because Janoris Jenkins is somebody that plays very well in he's a tenacious player. He's a very physical player, and he plays very well in man coverage, as does Marshawn Lattimore. Eli Apple did not play well in man coverage. Hell, he hardly played well in zone coverage, but he certainly wasn't somebody that you were going to put and have him man up on an island at any point. And so this gives Marshawn Lattimore an opportunity, if all should go well for the way that Dennis Allen wants to be able to work these guys. It gives Marshawn Lattimore an opportunity to play in a system and in a scheme that has that benefits him a little bit more, that plays more to his style.
Okay.
Think to Marcus Peters being traded to the Rams and struggling there, but then being traded to the Ravens and then being a part of a system that really complemented his skill set. Ideally, you see that same type, maybe not the same type of production. I mean, the guy went nuts when he got traded to Baltimore, but that same type of comfort for a guy like Marshawn Lattimore being able to play in a system that benefits him a little bit more. Marcus Williams, still one of the better deep safeties in the league. He has some tackling issues. Obviously, that's what he's always going to be known for. Unfortunately, the Minneapolis Miracle and a couple of other tackles that we've seen him miss, but he's one of the better deep safeties in the league, and was, if you look across the stats at the highest paid safeties across the NFL, maybe the only safety that outperformed him in terms of that group of 5 safeties probably is Earl Thomas. And other than that, Marcus Williams was above guys like, Kevin Byard and Tyrann Mathieu and Landon Collins, who all sit at the top of the NFL in terms of contracts. So, and he's got a contract year here. He plays a position that gets paid very, very well. So this is an opportunity for him to go out and make that check as he, potentially leaves the Saints going out of the 2020 season, or resigns with the Saints going into the 2021 season. And Malcolm Jenkins just gives you a veteran presence that you haven't really seen the Saints have before. You've seen since 2017, where this defense really sort of turned its corner. You've seen a lot of young secondary players there. Now you've got Malcolm Jenkins and Janoris Jenkins. You've got a veteran presence there that can definitely help this defense continue to communicate with one another, and the secondary start to band together. And everybody's in love with the young slot corner, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. There's just not enough that can be said about him.
Okay, so he is definitely Gardner-Johnson will he be the number 1 slot corner?
According to Aaron Glenn, defensive backs coach or secondary coach, as well as Dennis Allen, defensive coordinator, they both mentioned that you will see C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the slot a lot in 2020. So it might mean that they start off with P.J. Williams and then transition C.J. Gardner-Johnson in there because of the lack of training camp and lack of preseason that we're seeing across the NFL. But either way, I think at some point you see more C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the slot than you see elsewhere. They really love P.J. Williams because he also showed last year that he can plug in and be a guy that can play in the safety position as well. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how it is that they really utilize the versatility between those two guys.
Okay, and then the difference between, or the upgrade then, of Jenkins over Bell, who's gone?
Yeah, I think that when you look at that, you lose a little bit in terms of what you get in the run game and run support. Not that Malcolm Jenkins is bad in run support by any means, but certainly Von Bell was one of those guys that you used in the run game, that you loaded up the box with, that you ended up playing up against the line of scrimmage and allowing him to rush the passer. Malcolm Jenkins does all that as well. You go back and you look at his film from 2019, he played up on the line of scrimmage just about as much as any other safety in the NFL, but certainly Von Bell's skill set and youth definitely translated a little bit more on the field in terms of the actual stat production. But with Malcolm Jenkins, you get better in coverage. You get, the opportunities to play more of those 2 deep safety looks, which the Saints didn't often get the opportunity to roll with when it came to Von Bell and Marcus Williams in that tandem. But, you're going to see a little bit more of that, and you just get greater leadership. We know that Von Bell was the guy that was making the calls and was sort of the leader of that secondary in terms of the vocal leader. Now you'll see Malcolm Jenkins, who has been playing that role for years now, step into that role for the Saints.
Okay, and then finally, let's not forget how good the special teams unit was last year for New Orleans. Lutz had one of his best seasons. Morstead, who's been around for a long time, had one of his better seasons. And then Deontay Harris had
Yeah.
himself a heck of a season as both the kick returner and the punt returner. It was a very complete unit.
Yeah, this is one of the better special teams units in the NFL. You can even extend that conversation to the guys that cover punts like JT Gray and Justin Hardy, to the long snappers, Zach Wood. They have a very, very solid and cohesive at this point special teams unit, and their ability to flip the field has been huge for the Saints, particularly during the regular season. Thomas Morstead can flip the field just about, he can do that with just about any other punter in the NFL, and now you're starting to see that as well with the guy like Deontay Harris, who came in as an undrafted free agent out of Assumption College and then worked his way into first team All-Pro honors. Like, this was a guy that came in and absolutely blew up on the scene and is expected to be better in 2020, just based upon his ideas of decision making, as well as his ability to process the information at the NFL speed a little bit faster now that he can become a little bit more acclimated with it. And then of course just his just being around and being available now for his second year, it's going to give him more opportunities that way to make the right types of decisions. And the new change in the punt return rules, to where you can't just light up a punt returner once they catch the ball. You have to give them an opportunity to defend themselves. You have to give them an opportunity to ward off contact. So you're going to allow Deontay Harris essentially to have open space in the field once he fields punts now, and that's going to be huge for him. And so the idea of both of those guys, and Thomas Morstead and Deontay Harris, helping to flip the field, and Will Lutz being the type of kicker now to where you don't have to get as close as maybe a Kai Forbath used to, or a Zach Hawker used to at some point in order to get some points on the board. You have a guy that you can trust from 50 plus, 45 plus, that type of range.
Yeah, Lutz, what was he last year? 3 of 5 from 50 plus, and only 2 other misses on the entire season, other than those 2 50 plus. So, and it helps. He's in a dome. There's no question about it. But still, a very solid season for Lutz and the entire unit. Okay, now we'll hopefully have a chance to talk to you again before the season begins, especially since we're able to talk to you early on in the process. I'm going to wait until we talk before the season begins to ask you about how things are going, in the clubhouse, camaraderie with Drew Brees. And, you just never know things, even though, of course, I think that's the thing about what happened with Drew Brees is he has just earned so much respect in the NFL and within the New Orleans community that I just can't imagine that there's going to be any problems, any big problems. But, especially if the team wins. I mean, you probably won't notice anything before the season begins. Maybe you'll wait and see if something happens in the regular season. But then again, the team seems to be doing just fine in the regular season, and it isn't until the postseason that we find out whether or not there's an issue, and then it's too late, and the season's over.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we'll talk more about that. And then, of course, since when are you going to be able to get out there and watch them play? Did you get an opportunity at all? I know you're in California. Do you get an opportunity at all to go check them out? Normally, in a normal year, is this one of those years that you won't be able to?
Yeah, usually I'm able to go down there, no problem. But, we'll see now with the way that everything's going on, particularly with the rules in terms of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 types of press and the people that are allowed to be in there. I think that there are, some guys in terms of like local papers and everything that should get precedence, as well as any of the national media that comes down to cover. So we'll see if I get an opportunity. But if not, it's no problem. Like, we'll continue to cover as we always do, whether it be from afar, it doesn't matter.
Are they coming to California?
No, they won't be coming out. Once they canceled the preseason and everything, then there was no opportunity for them to. They were originally going to come and do joint camp. They were going to do a joint practice week with the Los Angeles Rams ahead of their first game, which was going to be the first game at SoFi. But with the cancellation of the preseason, then we won't see that going on any further. But I might make the trip out to Las Vegas when they come out week 2.
Oh yeah,
if they're allowing fans in the stands by then. But
I know, right?
We'll see.
Yeah, that's another bummer situation. Right. But hey, let's just hope that we got football. That's
fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's the number one deal there. Locked On Podcast. When is that available for Saints fans?
Yeah, every single Monday through Friday. I'll try to press the night before. If not, then very early in the morning. So you're always getting the most up-to-date information there. About 22 to 30 minutes every single Monday through Friday. Everything that you need, Saints-wise, we got you covered. It's perfect for your daily commute, doing a little bit of laundry, whatever it is that you're going on. 22 minutes, everything you need to know every day.
Awesome. Ross, great job as always. We'll look to talk to you again before the season kicks off.
Thank you, my friend. Always a pleasure. Looking forward to it.